The phone rang at exactly 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, interrupting my dinner and shattering 6 years of carefully constructed peace. My mother's voice cut through the speaker with the same entitled tone I remembered from my teenage years, but her words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Cleon, honey, we need you to contribute $15,000 to Amber's wedding fund. It's only fair since you're doing so well now." My fork clattered against the plate as memories of sleeping in my car between shifts flooded back, of choosing between textbooks and groceries, while my parents bought my sister a brand new Honda Civic for her sweet 16. The call transported me back to that devastating conversation 6 years ago when I was 18 and desperate. I had just received my acceptance letter to State University, and the reality of tuition costs was crushing my dreams into dust. I remember walking into our modest 3-bedroom ranch house in suburban Ohio, clutching scholarship applications and financial aid forms, hoping my parents would help bridge the gap between what I could earn and what college actually cost. My father, Frank, was hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, still wearing his grease-stained coveralls from the auto shop. His weathered hands moved slowly across the keyboard as he paid bills online, the same ritual he performed every Tuesday evening. My mother, Patricia, sat across from him, sorting through mail with the mechanical precision of someone who had performed this task countless times. Her part-time receptionist job at the local dental office barely covered groceries, but she managed our household finances with iron discipline. "Dad, Mom, I need to talk to you about college." I began, my voice cracking with nervous energy. The acceptance letter felt heavy in my trembling hands, representing everything I had worked towards since freshman year. My grade point average of 3.8 had earned me partial academic scholarships, but the remaining $22,000 per year seemed insurmountable. Frank looked up from his screen, his tired brown eyes focusing on me with the same expression he wore when explaining expensive car repairs to customers. "Son, we talked about this. College is your responsibility now. You're 18, practically an adult. We can't afford to help you, and honestly, it wouldn't be right anyway. You need to learn how the real world works." The words felt like physical blows. I had watched my parents spend thousands on my sister Amber's dance classes, gymnastics equipment, and competition fees throughout her childhood. Just 2 months earlier, they had surprised her with a cherry red Honda Civic for her 16th birthday, complete with custom rims and a premium sound system. The car cost more than one full semester at State University. But the scholarships only cover half. I protested, showing them the financial breakdown I had calculated dozens of times. "I'm already working at Miller's grocery store 25 hours a week, and I tutor 3 kids after school. Even if I work 40 hours, I can't cover room board and the remaining tuition." Patricia set down her stack of bills and fixed me with a stern look. "Cleon, we raised you to be independent and responsible. Taking on student loans will teach you the value of education. Your father and I never had anyone hand us anything, and look how well we turned out. This is character building." I wanted to scream about the inequality, about how they had handed Amber everything, while teaching me harsh lessons about self-reliance. Instead, I swallowed my anger and spent the next 4 months working 3 jobs simultaneously. Miller's grocery store provided steady income during evening shifts. The Shell station on Route 35 gave me overnight hours, Friday through Sunday, and tutoring math to middle school students filled my remaining free time. College became a brutal marathon of survival. My dorm room was the size of a prison cell, shared with a roommate who dropped out after freshman year because his parents stopped sending money. I lived on instant ramen peanut butter sandwiches and whatever free food I could find at campus events. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford as I maintained my grades while working enough hours to pay for textbooks, rent, and basic necessities. The irony wasn't lost on me when Amber started posting Instagram photos from expensive shopping trips and weekend getaways funded entirely by our parents. While I was calculating whether I could afford both laundry detergent and toothpaste in the same week, She was showing off designer handbags and restaurant meals that cost more than my entire monthly food budget. 6 years later, sitting in my comfortable two-bedroom apartment with my engineering degree framed on the wall, that phone call brought every suppressed emotion rushing back to the surface. My software engineering career at TechFlow Solutions provided a salary of $78,000 annually, allowing me to finally live without constant financial anxiety. I had worked my way up from junior developer to senior systems architect, earning respect and recognition that my younger self could never have imagined. But my mother's casual demand revealed the same entitled mindset that had shaped my entire relationship with my family. Patricia continued speaking as if her request was perfectly reasonable, explaining how Amber deserved a beautiful wedding and how successful I had become. The audacity of expecting me to bankroll my sister's celebration while they had refused to invest a single penny in my education created a fury I had kept buried for years. We already promised Amber a $25,000 budget. Patricia explained with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to discuss grocery shopping. She's been planning this wedding for months, and Derek's family expects something elegant and sophisticated. We thought you'd be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to family happiness, especially since we taught you the independence that made you so successful. The twisted logic made my stomach churn. They were reframing their neglect as a gift, claiming credit for my achievements, while simultaneously expecting me to subsidize their promises to my sister. The manipulation was so blatant and shameless that I could barely form coherent thoughts. My phone buzzed again 40 minutes later, this time displaying Amber's name across the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity about her perspective compelled me to answer. Her voice bubbled with excitement and expectation, as if she were calling to share wonderful news about a surprise party. Cleon, Mom told me the amazing news about your contribution to my wedding fund. I am so incredibly grateful and excited that you want to be such a huge part of my special day. Derek and I have been looking at venues in Napa Valley, and there's this absolutely gorgeous vineyard that would be perfect for our ceremony. The words tumbled out of her mouth with breathless enthusiasm, painting a picture of extravagance that made my head spin. She described a destination wedding weekend that sounded more like a luxury vacation than a simple ceremony. Her guest list included 150 people requiring hotel room blocks, transportation arrangements, and catered meals for multiple events throughout the weekend. The venue fee is $8,000, but that includes the ceremony space, reception hall, and bridal suite for the weekend. The photographer I want specializes in destination weddings and charges $6,000 for the full package, but his portfolio is absolutely stunning. And Cleon, you should see the dress I found at this boutique in San Francisco. It's $4,000, but it's completely unique and handmade with Italian lace. I listened in stunned silence as she detailed expenses that individually exceeded what I had spent on textbooks during my entire college career. The casual way she discussed thousands of dollars revealed a complete disconnect from financial reality, a worldview shaped by years of having every desire fulfilled without question or sacrifice. Amber. I interrupted, finding my voice amid the flood of wedding plans. Do you remember when I was trying to pay for college? Do you recall Mom and Dad telling me they couldn't afford to help? Her enthusiastic chatter stopped abruptly, replaced by confused silence that stretched for several seconds. When she finally responded, her tone carried genuine bewilderment rather than defensiveness or embarrassment. That was like 6 years ago, Cleon. Why are you still hung up on that ancient history? College was your thing, your choice, your responsibility. This is completely different because it's about family coming together to celebrate love and commitment. Besides, you turned out fine, right? You have a great job and a nice apartment. Everything worked out perfectly. The dismissive response ignited a rage I hadn't felt since those desperate nights in college when I had chosen between gasoline money and dinner. Her complete inability to understand the connection between past neglect and current expectations revealed the depth of her entitlement and privilege. She genuinely believed that my struggles were irrelevant ancient history, while her desires represented urgent family priorities. Amber, who's paying for Derek's side of the wedding expenses. Surely his family is contributing to this Napa Valley extravaganza. Another pause. This one tinged with uncomfortable reality rather than confusion. Derek's family situation was apparently more complex than the fairy tale wedding she was planning. Well, Derek's parents think we should have a smaller, more modest ceremony. They offered to pay for a reception at their country club, but it's not really my vision for our special day. They don't understand that this is a once-in-a-lifetime event that deserves to be absolutely perfect and memorable. I pressed further, sensing weakness in her carefully constructed narrative. So they refused to fund your Napa Valley plans? They didn't refuse exactly, she hedged, they just have different priorities and values. Derek's father, Jonathan, keeps talking about fiscal responsibility and starting our marriage with smart financial decisions. But Cleon, you know how important this is to me. I've been dreaming about my perfect wedding since I was little, and now I finally have the chance to make it reality. The conversation revealed the true dynamics behind the wedding funding crisis. Derek's wealthy family had offered reasonable support for a sensible celebration, but Amber's grandiose expectations exceeded their willingness to indulge her fantasies. Rather than adjusting her plans to match available resources, she and our parents had decided to manipulate me into bridging the gap between fantasy and reality. You know what's really amazing? Amber continued, her voice regaining its excited tone. Mom and Dad told everyone in the family that you enthusiastically volunteered to help with the major expenses. Cousin Rachel was so impressed that you wanted to make my wedding extra special. Aunt Jennifer said she always knew you were generous and family-oriented despite being so busy with your career. The final piece of manipulation clicked into place. Not only were they expecting me to fund their promises, but they had already told extended family that I had eagerly agreed to their scheme. They had committed my reputation and generosity without consulting me, creating social pressure and public expectations that would make refusal seem selfish and cruel. I called my best friend Marcus immediately after hanging up with Amber. Marcus had been my roommate during the worst financial struggles of college, witnessing firsthand the sacrifices and hardships I had endured, while my family funded my sister's luxuries. His perspective and support had sustained me through countless difficult nights, and his engineering career at a competing firm provided both professional camaraderie and personal understanding. Dude, that's absolutely insane, Marcus responded after I explained the situation. They're basically trying to retroactively tax your success to pay for promises they made without consulting you. It's like they think your college suffering earned them the right to spend your adult money. His validation felt like oxygen to my suffocated emotions. Marcus understood the deeper implications of my family's manipulation because he had witnessed the daily reality of my college poverty. He had seen me skip meals, wear the same 3 shirts for months, and calculate every expenditure down to individual quarters. What really gets me, I continued, is how they've already told everyone I agreed to this. They've made me look like either a generous brother who's thrilled to help or a heartless villain who breaks promises to family. Marcus suggested a strategic response that would expose their manipulation while protecting my reputation and relationships. Rather than simply refusing their demands, he recommended documenting the full history of our family's financial dynamics and presenting the truth to everyone who had been told their fabricated version of events. That evening, I received a call from my cousin Rachel that confirmed my worst suspicions about the family narrative campaign my parents had orchestrated. Saturday afternoon arrived with an invitation disguised as a casual family dinner. My mother's voicemail had mentioned exciting family news and bringing everyone together to discuss wonderful developments. The deliberately vague language should have triggered warning signals, but I was still processing the shock of their wedding funding demands. I arrived at my childhood home expecting a simple meal with my parents and sister. Instead, I walked into a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to maximize social pressure and minimize my ability to refuse their financial demands. The living room was crowded with people who had clearly been briefed on their roles in this performance. Amber sat on the floral print sofa between Derek and a well-dressed couple I had never met, but immediately recognized as his parents. Their expensive clothing and confident postures radiated the kind of wealth that comes from generations of successful business decisions. Derek's father, Jonathan, wore a perfectly tailored navy blazer over pressed khakis, while his mother, Vivian, displayed the understated elegance of someone who never worries about money. My parents flanked the group like gracious hosts presenting a business proposal, rather than family members discussing personal matters. Frank had traded his usual work clothes for a button-down shirt and slacks, while Patricia wore the same dress she reserved for church services and special occasions. The formal atmosphere felt calculated and uncomfortable. "Cleon," Patricia exclaimed with theatrical warmth, "we're so glad you could join us for this special planning session. Derek's parents wanted to meet the generous brother who's making Amber's dream wedding possible." Jonathan rose from the sofa with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and negotiating million-dollar deals. His handshake was firm and assessing the kind of grip that evaluated character and potential in seconds. "We've heard so much about your success in software engineering," he began with a smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "It's refreshing to meet a young man who understands family obligations and the importance of supporting those we love during milestone moments." The condescending tone set my teeth on edge. Jonathan was speaking to me like a subordinate employee being praised for meeting basic expectations rather than an adult being manipulated into funding someone else's excessive spending. His assumption that I had already agreed to their scheme revealed how thoroughly my parents had misrepresented the situation. Vivian joined the conversation with the polished diplomacy of someone who had spent decades managing social situations and family dynamics. Her voice carried the kind of authority that comes from never being questioned or challenged. "Amber has shown us the most beautiful venue in Napa Valley," she continued, "and we think you should feel honored to participate in such a gorgeous celebration. The vineyard setting will create memories that last a lifetime, and your contribution will make it possible for both families to come together in such an elegant atmosphere." The manipulation was masterful in its subtlety. Rather than directly asking for money, they were framing my expected contribution as an honor and privilege, while simultaneously applying social pressure through the presence of Derek's wealthy parents. They were counting on my reluctance to create conflict in front of strangers to ensure my compliance with their demands. Amber produced a thick portfolio filled with venue photos, menu options, floral arrangements, and detailed budget breakdowns. The presentation was polished and professional, clearly designed to justify the enormous expenses she was planning to incur. She spread the materials across the coffee table like an investment banker, presenting acquisition proposals to potential funders. "Cleon, look at these gorgeous ceremony photos," she gushed, pointing to images of previous weddings at the Napa Valley Vineyard. "The sunset lighting is absolutely magical, and the reception space can accommodate 150 guests comfortably. The catering menu includes locally sourced organic ingredients and wine pairings from the vineyard's private collection. Each detail represented hundreds or thousands of dollars in additional costs. The organic catering added $30 per guest to the reception expenses. The private wine collection required a premium package that doubled the beverage costs. The professional photography demanded a weekend commitment that tripled the standard session fees." Frank and Patricia watched my reaction with barely concealed anxiety, clearly hoping I would be overwhelmed by the beautiful presentation and social pressure. Their investment in this elaborate setup revealed how much they were counting on my financial contribution to avoid having to fulfill their promises with their own resources. "We've already made deposits on several vendors," Patricia explained with forced casualness, So the timeline is pretty firm. The venue requires final payment 6 weeks before the ceremony date, and the photographer needs half his fee when we sign the contract next week. The timeline pressure was another manipulation tactic designed to prevent careful consideration or alternative planning. By creating artificial urgency around deposits and contracts, they were trying to force an immediate decision without allowing time for me to process the full implications of their demands. Derek remained unusually quiet throughout the presentation, occasionally glancing at his parents, with expressions I couldn't quite read. His silence suggested either embarrassment about the financial manipulation or concern about how his family was perceiving the situation. As Amber's fiancé, he was caught between supporting her dreams and managing his parents' expectations about fiscal responsibility. The conversation reached its climactic moment when Jonathan revealed the most shocking detail about their coordination and planning. When Patricia and Frank first told us about your enthusiastic willingness to contribute significantly to the wedding expenses, we decided to let the kids plan something truly special instead of insisting on our original country club reception. We were initially prepared to fund a modest celebration ourselves, but we didn't want to interfere with your generous family gesture or hurt your feelings by taking over the financial planning. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Derek's parents had originally offered to pay for a reasonable wedding celebration, but my parents had convinced them to withdraw their support by claiming I insisted on contributing significantly and would be deeply hurt if excluded from the financial planning. They had manipulated not only me but also Derek's family, using my supposed generosity as leverage to secure funding for Amber's extravagant plans while positioning themselves as thoughtful coordinators rather than desperate manipulators. I sat in stunned silence as the full scope of their deception became clear. They had sabotaged potential funding from Derek's family, created false expectations with vendors and venues, and committed my reputation and resources without my knowledge or consent. The elaborate dinner setup was designed to make refusal seem impossible and unreasonable. But rather than breaking down or agreeing to their demands, I felt something cold and determined crystallizing in my chest. They had underestimated my ability to see through manipulation and overestimated my willingness to be publicly humiliated for their benefit. The game they were playing required careful strategy and precise execution. But I was no longer the desperate 18-year-old who had begged for college assistance. The family meeting had revealed layers of manipulation that demanded thorough investigation. I spent the following week systematically researching my parents' true financial situation, determined to understand exactly how much deception had shaped my relationship with my family over the years. Public records in our county provided a wealth of information about property values, mortgage histories, and major financial transactions. I discovered that my parents' 3-bedroom ranch house had been completely paid off 2 years earlier through a cash refinancing that eliminated their monthly mortgage payments. The property purchased for $89,000 in 1998 was now valued at $160,000 and owned free and clear. The revelation was particularly shocking because my parents had consistently claimed financial stress and tight budgets throughout my high school and college years. During my senior year of high school, Frank had explained their inability to help with college costs by detailing their monthly obligations and lack of savings. Patricia had reinforced this narrative by discussing the sacrifices they made to provide basic necessities for our family. Further investigation through obituary records and estate proceedings revealed that Frank's uncle Harold had died 2.5 years earlier, leaving a substantial inheritance to his surviving relatives. Harold had been a successful small business owner who never married or had children, dividing his estate among his siblings' families. Frank's share of the inheritance totaled $47,000, received just months before I had desperately requested college assistance. The timeline was devastating in its clarity. While I was working 3 jobs, and surviving on ramen noodles during my sophomore year, my parents had received enough money to pay off their house and fund my remaining college expenses twice over. They had watched me struggle with textbook costs and food insecurity while sitting on a windfall that could have eliminated my financial stress completely. I arranged a casual coffee meeting with Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, who had lived across the street for 30 years and maintained close relationships with everyone in our subdivision. Her wealth of neighborhood gossip and keen observation skills made her an invaluable source of information about my parents' recent activities and purchases. "Oh, honey, your parents have been doing so well lately," Mrs. Henderson shared over coffee and homemade cookies at her kitchen table. "That beautiful RV they bought last month must have cost a fortune." Frank was so excited, showing it off to all the neighbors, talking about their plans to drive cross-country for their 25th anniversary. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My parents had purchased a luxury recreational vehicle worth tens of thousands of dollars, while claiming they couldn't afford to help fund my sister's wedding without my financial contribution. The timing of the purchase, just weeks after their initial conversation with me about wedding expenses, revealed the true nature of their financial priorities. Mrs. Henderson continued sharing details about their recent spending patterns, oblivious to the impact of her revelations on my understanding of my family's deception. "Patricia showed me pictures of the cruise they're planning for next spring," she added. 2 weeks in the Caribbean with all those fancy excursions and specialty dining packages. She was so excited about the balcony cabin they reserved. I told her how lucky they were to be able to afford such wonderful adventures. I called my former college roommate Tyler, now a successful lawyer specializing in family financial disputes. His legal background and personal experience with manipulative relatives made him the perfect advisor for understanding my options and developing a strategic response to my parents' behavior. "Cleon, what you're describing is textbook financial manipulation," Tyler explained during our phone conversation. "They're using artificial scarcity to justify their demands on your resources while hiding their own wealth and spending. In legal terms, they're misrepresenting their financial situation to obtain money under false pretenses." Tyler helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't just emotionally manipulative, but potentially legally problematic if they were misrepresenting their finances to multiple parties. Their claims of financial hardship to both me and Derek's family while making major luxury purchases could constitute fraud if they were using those false claims to secure funding commitments. "The key is documentation," Tyler advised. "You need to gather evidence of their actual financial capacity, their false statements about money troubles, and their timeline of purchases versus requests for assistance. If you can prove they've been lying about their finances to manipulate multiple people, you'll have significant leverage in any confrontation." I spent the rest of the week compiling evidence through public records, social media posts, and conversations with family friends. The pattern of deception was extensive and deliberate, spanning years of false claims about financial stress while maintaining an increasingly luxurious lifestyle. The most damaging discovery came through Derek's social media accounts, which revealed photos from an expensive dinner celebration where my parents had announced their promise to fund Amber's dream wedding. The restaurant was known for entrees that started at $50 per person, and the champagne visible in the photos cost more than my weekly grocery budget during college. But the investigation's climactic revelation came through an unexpected source. While reviewing social media posts for timeline information, I discovered that my parents had purchased their $32,000 luxury RV during the exact same week they had first told Amber they couldn't afford her wedding expenses without external help. The timing was so brazen and callous that it took my breath away. They had literally been shopping for recreational vehicles while simultaneously claiming poverty and manipulating their children into believing family financial crisis required my intervention. The RV purchase represented more than twice what they were demanding from me for wedding expenses, proving they had ample resources, but preferred to spend their money on personal luxuries rather than family obligations they had voluntarily created. Armed with comprehensive evidence of their financial deception, I began planning a strategic response that would expose their manipulation while protecting my relationships with extended family members who had been given false information about my role in the wedding planning process. The evidence I had gathered painted a clear picture of systematic deception and manipulation spanning multiple years. Rather than confronting my parents privately and allowing them to spin their narrative to other family members, I decided to implement a strategic response that would present the facts to our entire extended family before addressing their demands directly. Marcus and Tyler provided crucial support in developing a comprehensive plan that would expose the truth while maintaining my reputation and relationships. Our strategy focused on documentation timing and systematic communication with every family member who had been told false information about my supposed eagerness to fund wedding expenses. I began by creating a detailed timeline document that outlined every relevant financial event over the past 6 years. The chronology started with my college funding requests and my parents' claims of financial inability to help continued through their inheritance and major purchases, and concluded with their current demands for wedding contributions. The document included supporting evidence such as property records, purchase dates, and witness statements from family friends. The timeline revealed patterns of behavior that went far beyond the current wedding situation. My parents had consistently misrepresented their financial capacity to justify their decisions while maintaining their desired lifestyle and spending patterns. They had trained our family to accept their claims of financial stress while never questioning the inconsistencies in their statements and actions. My first strategic conversation was with my grandmother Dorothy Frank's 74-year-old mother, who had always been the emotional center of our extended family. Her opinions and perspectives carried significant weight, with aunts, uncles, and cousins, making her support crucial for any successful challenge to my parents' narrative. Dorothy invited me for Sunday dinner at her cozy 2-bedroom house, where she had lived since my grandfather's death 8 years earlier. Her kitchen table had been the site of countless family discussions and problem-solving sessions, and she approached our conversation with the wisdom and directness of someone who had navigated decades of family drama. "Grandmother, I need to ask you something important about my college years." I began after we had finished her famous pot roast and settled into her living room with coffee and apple pie. "Do you remember any conversations about helping with my tuition or expenses?" Dorothy's expression shifted from pleasant contentment to sharp focus as she considered my question. Her memory was exceptional despite her age, and she had always prided herself on being involved in her grandchildren's major life decisions. "Of course I remember," she replied with growing intensity. "I offered to help pay for your college education when you were accepted to State University. I had money specifically set aside for my grandchildren's education expenses, and I was so proud that you were the first one to need it." The words confirmed my worst suspicions while simultaneously validating my feelings of betrayal. Dorothy had been prepared to invest in my education, but that opportunity had been blocked by my parents' manipulation and lies. "What did my father tell you when you made that offer?" I pressed gently. Dorothy's face darkened with an expression I had rarely seen from my usually gentle grandmother. Her voice carried the edge of someone discovering they had been deceived by people they trusted implicitly. "Frank told me you had declined my help because you wanted to prove your independence and build character through self-reliance. He said you specifically requested that family members not offer assistance because you were determined to handle college entirely on your own. I was so impressed by your maturity and determination that I put the money back in my savings account." The revelation was devastating in its completeness. My parents had not only refused to help fund my education, but had actively prevented other family members from providing assistance. They had stolen opportunities and support that could have dramatically changed my college experience, while claiming credit for teaching me independence and responsibility. "Grandmother, they never told me about your offer," I said quietly. I would have been incredibly grateful for any help, and I never asked them to discourage family assistance. Dorothy sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the implications of what I had revealed. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup, and I could see her mental chronology readjusting as she reconsidered years of family interactions through this new lens of understanding. "What else have they lied about?" she asked, with the directness of someone who needed to understand the full scope of deception. I shared the timeline document with Dorothy, walking through each piece of evidence and explaining how my parents' current wedding demands connected to their historical pattern of manipulation. She listened with growing anger and disappointment as the full picture emerged. Over the following week, I had similar conversations with aunts, uncles, and cousins throughout our extended family network. Each discussion revealed additional instances where my parents had misrepresented situations or manipulated information to control family narratives and relationships. My Aunt Jennifer, Patricia's younger sister, had been told that I was too proud to accept family help during college and had specifically asked not to be offered assistance. My uncle Robert, Frank's older brother, had offered to co-sign student loans, but was told I had already secured better financing through my own connections. Cousin Rachel had wanted to help with textbook expenses but was discouraged from interfering with my character-building experience. The systematic nature of their deception was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. They had isolated me from family support while claiming to teach valuable life lessons, then positioned themselves as caring parents who had raised a successful and independent son. They had rewritten history to make their neglect seem like intentional character development. Each family member I spoke with expressed shock and anger about being deceived. More importantly, they began sharing their own experiences with my parents' manipulation and misrepresentation over the years. A pattern emerged of Frank and Patricia controlling family information and narratives to serve their own interests while claiming to act in everyone's best interests. The strategic conversations also revealed that my parents had already scheduled Amber's engagement party for the following Saturday, planning to use the celebration as an opportunity to publicly cement my financial commitment to the wedding expenses. Multiple relatives mentioned receiving invitations that specifically mentioned celebrating Cleon's generous contribution to making Amber's dreams come true. This revelation provided the perfect opportunity for my strategic response. Rather than allowing them to use the engagement party to pressure me into public compliance, I would use the same gathering to present the truth about their financial deception and manipulation. The timing would maximize the impact while ensuring that everyone who had been misled would hear the correct information simultaneously. Tyler helped me prepare a presentation that was factual, professional, and devastating in its implications. Rather than attacking my parents personally or emotionally, the presentation would simply reveal the timeline of events and allow the evidence to speak for itself. The goal was truth and accountability, rather than punishment or revenge. Saturday evening arrived with the crisp October air that made outdoor celebrations perfect in our part of Ohio. My parents had transformed their backyard into an elegant party space with string lights, rented tables, and catered food that clearly represented significant expense and planning. 30 family members and friends mingled throughout the space, creating the warm atmosphere of a genuine celebration. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio that contained all my documentation and prepared remarks. The evidence was organized chronologically and legally verified through Tyler's review, ensuring that every claim I planned to make could be substantiated with concrete proof. Amber looked radiant in a flowing dress that perfectly captured the engagement party aesthetic she had envisioned. Derek stayed close to her side, playing the role of devoted fiancé, while occasionally glancing at his parents with expressions that suggested ongoing concerns about the financial dynamics surrounding their wedding plans. The initial hour of the party proceeded exactly as my parents had orchestrated. Relatives congratulated me on my engineering success and praised my generosity in supporting Amber's wedding dreams. Several cousins mentioned how impressed they were with my family commitment despite my busy career demands. Grandmother Dorothy played her role perfectly, engaging in normal conversation while carefully avoiding any mention of our recent discussion about college funding. Frank and Patricia worked the crowd like seasoned politicians, ensuring that every guest understood the narrative they had constructed about my enthusiastic involvement in wedding planning. They had clearly briefed people about my supposed eagerness to contribute financially, creating social momentum that would make refusal seem heartless and inexplicable. The pivotal moment arrived when Patricia called for everyone's attention and asked Amber to share her exciting wedding plans with the assembled family. This was clearly the moment they had planned to lock me into public commitment using social pressure and family expectations to ensure my compliance with their financial demands. Amber stood confidently in the center of the gathering, holding Derek's hand as she began describing her vision for their Napa Valley celebration. Her enthusiasm was genuine and infectious as she painted vivid pictures of vineyard ceremonies, gourmet catering, and weekend festivities that would bring both families together in an elegant setting. And the most wonderful part, Amber continued with growing excitement, is that my amazing brother Cleon has volunteered to help make these dreams possible through his generous financial contribution. Having family support for such an important milestone means everything to Derek and me. The moment had arrived for my response. I stood slowly, allowing anticipation to build as family members prepared to hear my gracious acceptance speech and heartfelt commitment to funding my sister's wedding expenses. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began with calm sincerity, and thank you, Amber, for including me in your wedding plans. Before I respond to your kind words about my supposed contribution, I think it's important that everyone understands the complete context of our family's financial discussions. I opened my portfolio and withdrew the timeline document that Tyler and I had prepared. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and palpable, as family members realized this was not going to be the simple acceptance speech they had expected. 6 years ago, when I was 18 and accepted to State University, I approached my parents requesting assistance with college expenses that my scholarships and part-time work couldn't cover. I was told that our family couldn't afford to help because of tight finances, and that I needed to learn independence and responsibility. The audience listened with growing attention as I described my college struggles in detail. I explained the 3 jobs, the ramen noodle diet, sleeping in my car between shifts, and choosing between textbooks and basic necessities while maintaining the grades necessary to keep my scholarships. During those same years, I continued, my sister received a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday, designer clothing, expensive dance classes, and family vacations that I couldn't afford to join even when invited. Murmurs began spreading through the crowd as relatives started connecting dots and reconsidering family dynamics they had never questioned. Several people glanced at my parents with expressions of growing concern and confusion. Now, 6 years later, my parents are demanding that I contribute $15,000 to fund my sister's wedding expenses, while claiming they cannot afford to fulfill promises they made without consulting me. I pulled out property records showing their mortgage payoff and inheritance information that revealed their actual financial capacity. The documentation was clear and undeniable, leaving no room for alternative interpretation or justification. 2 years ago, my parents received a $47,000 inheritance that they used to pay off their house completely. Last month, they purchased a $32,000 recreational vehicle for their anniversary travels. They are currently planning a $15,000 Caribbean cruise for next spring. The silence was deafening as family members processed the implications of what I was revealing. Their ability to afford luxury purchases while demanding my financial support for family obligations they had created was obviously manipulative and hypocritical. But the most devastating revelation was still to come. Grandmother Dorothy, would you please tell everyone about the conversation you and I had last Sunday regarding college assistance? Dorothy rose from her chair with the dignity and authority of the family matriarch she had always been. Her voice carried across the silent gathering with perfect clarity and unmistakable anger. I offered to help pay for Cleon's college education when he was accepted to State University, she announced. I had money set aside specifically for my grandchildren's educational needs, and I was proud to support his academic achievements. Frank told me that Cleon had declined family assistance because he wanted to prove his independence, and specifically requested that relatives not offer help. The collective intake of breath was audible as everyone realized the scope of manipulation that had shaped my college experience. My parents had not only refused to help, but had actively prevented other family members from providing support, while claiming to teach me valuable character lessons. They stole opportunities for family assistance while watching me struggle with poverty and hunger, I continued. They prevented multiple relatives from offering help while claiming I was too proud to accept support. They manipulated everyone in this family to ensure their version of my character development could proceed without interference. The climactic revelation came when I presented evidence of their ultimate financial deception. The most shocking discovery is that my parents planned to use my wedding contribution to partially fund their cruise vacation. Amber's wedding expenses have been significantly inflated, with much of the requested money being redirected to their personal luxury spending rather than actual celebration costs. Derek's parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their reassessment of the situation. Jonathan's investment banking experience clearly helped him recognize financial manipulation when confronted with documented evidence. And Vivian's social sophistication allowed her to understand the full implications of what had been revealed. The engagement party had become something entirely different from what my parents had planned. But the truth was finally being shared with people who deserved to understand the reality behind years of family narratives and relationship dynamics. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was electric, with tension and shocked silence. Family members looked between me, my parents, and each other, processing the dramatic shift in their understanding of years of family dynamics and relationships. Frank and Patricia stood frozen in mortified silence as their carefully constructed narrative collapsed around them. The evidence I had presented was irrefutable, and their inability to respond or defend themselves confirmed the accuracy of every accusation I had made. Derek's father, Jonathan, was the first to break the uncomfortable silence, his business background providing him with the framework to address financial deception directly and professionally. Frank, Patricia, I think we need to have a serious conversation about the misrepresentations you've made to both families regarding this wedding funding situation. When you told us that Cleon was eagerly volunteering to contribute significantly, we withdrew our offer to fund Derek and Amber's celebration ourselves. We've been operating under completely false information. Vivian's voice carried the controlled disappointment of someone who had invested trust in people who had betrayed that confidence through systematic deception and manipulation. We specifically chose not to interfere with what you described as Cleon's generous family gesture. We didn't want to hurt his feelings or minimize his contribution by funding the celebration ourselves. Your lies have created unnecessary conflict and damaged relationships that should have been built on honesty and mutual respect. Amber's face showed a mixture of embarrassment, confusion, and dawning understanding as she began to comprehend how her wedding planning had been used as a tool for her parents' manipulation of multiple families. Derek's hand on her shoulder provided support as she processed the revelation that her dream celebration had been funded through deception rather than genuine family generosity. My grandmother Dorothy took charge of the situation with the authority that comes from being the family's emotional anchor for decades. Her voice carried both disappointment in my parents' behavior and determination to restore honest communication among family members, Frank, Patricia, I am deeply disappointed in your dishonesty and manipulation. You've hurt your son, deceived your extended family, and damaged relationships that took years to build. This behavior stops now, and you will make amends through actions rather than words. Several aunts and uncles began sharing their own experiences with my parents' information control and narrative manipulation over the years. The conversation revealed a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond the current wedding situation, touching multiple relationships and family decisions throughout recent years. Frank finally found his voice, though his words carried shame and defensive justification rather than genuine accountability or remorse. We thought we were doing what was best for everyone involved. Cleon turned out successful and independent because of the challenges he overcame. Amber deserves a beautiful wedding celebration. We were trying to bring the family together for a positive celebration. Patricia added her own attempt at rationalization, though her voice lacked conviction, and her explanation highlighted the selfish motivations behind their deception. We never intended to hurt anyone or cause family conflict. The inheritance money was supposed to be for our retirement security. The recreational vehicle represents years of sacrifice and saving. We just wanted to make Amber's dreams come true without depleting our future financial stability. The inadequacy of their explanations was obvious to everyone present. They had been caught manipulating multiple family members through systematic lies and were now trying to justify their behavior rather than acknowledging the damage they had caused. Over the following 3 months, our family underwent a dramatic transformation that required genuine commitment to honesty and accountability from everyone involved. The engagement party revelation had created a crisis that demanded real change rather than superficial apologies and temporary behavior modifications. Frank and Patricia entered family therapy with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a licensed therapist who specialized in family financial dynamics and communication patterns. The therapy sessions forced them to confront their tendency to manipulate information and control family narratives through deception and selective truth-telling. The therapy process was uncomfortable and challenging for my parents, requiring them to acknowledge decades of behavior patterns that had damaged relationships and trust. Dr. Walsh helped them understand that their manipulation had stemmed from fear of disappointment and desire to control outcomes, but had ultimately created the very conflicts and resentments they had been trying to avoid. Amber underwent her own process of personal growth and self-examination as she came to understand how her entitled expectations had been enabled by our parents' manipulation and financial misrepresentation. She began taking responsibility for her role in the wedding funding crisis, rather than positioning herself as an innocent victim of family conflict. Working with Derek and his parents, Amber developed a more realistic and financially responsible approach to their wedding celebration. Instead of the extravagant Napa Valley destination weekend, they planned an elegant but modest ceremony at Derek's Family Country Club with a reception that honored their commitment while respecting everyone's financial boundaries. The scaled-down celebration was actually more meaningful and personal than the original grandiose plans. With 100 guests instead of 150, the atmosphere was intimate and focused on the couple's commitment, rather than impressive displays of wealth and luxury. 6 months after the engagement party confrontation, I made the decision to contribute $3,000 to Amber and Derek's wedding as a genuine gift, rather than an obligation or manipulation response. The contribution was voluntary, reasonable, and given freely without pressure or expectation of gratitude beyond normal family appreciation. The gift represented my choice to support my sister's happiness while maintaining clear boundaries about financial manipulation and family obligations. It demonstrated that generosity flows naturally from healthy relationships built on honesty and mutual respect rather than guilt, pressure, and deception. Frank and Patricia's journey toward accountability included making concrete amends for their past behavior. They established education funds for their future grandchildren ensuring that the next generation would receive the college support they had denied me. They also made a significant contribution to a scholarship fund at State University in recognition of the educational opportunities they had compromised through their manipulation. Most importantly, our family learned to communicate honestly about money expectations and responsibilities, instead of relying on manipulation and narrative control to achieve desired outcomes. Dr. Walsh helped us establish healthy boundaries and communication patterns that prevented future financial conflicts while preserving genuine family relationships. The transformation wasn't easy or immediate, requiring ongoing commitment from everyone involved. But 12 months after that shocking engagement party, our family relationships were stronger and more authentic than they had been in years. Trust had been rebuilt through consistent, honest behavior rather than words and promises. Derek and Amber's marriage began with a foundation of financial honesty and realistic expectations rather than manipulation and debt. Their wedding celebration reflected their actual values and priorities instead of fantasies funded through family deception and pressure. My relationship with my parents evolved into something more mature and equitable, as they learned to respect my independence while offering genuine support rather than manipulation disguised as family obligation. They began treating me as an adult family member whose boundaries and decisions deserved respect, regardless of their personal preferences or financial desires. The most profound lesson from our family crisis was understanding that authentic relationships require honesty, even when truth creates discomfort or disappointment. Love expressed through manipulation ultimately damages the very connections it claims to protect, while respect for boundaries and individual autonomy strengthens family bonds across generations. True family support comes from mutual respect and honest communication, rather than guilt pressure and financial manipulation. When family members feel free to make genuine choices about their contributions and involvement, their generosity flows naturally from love rather than obligation or fear of disappointing others. Standing up for yourself in family relationships creates space for authentic connections to grow and thrive. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their dysfunction while offering them opportunities to develop healthier patterns of interaction and communication. The wedding funding crisis taught us that financial boundaries are essential for maintaining healthy family relationships. Money conversations require the same honesty and respect as any other important family discussion, and attempts to manipulate or pressure family members ultimately damage the trust that makes genuine support possible. Our family's transformation demonstrated that change is possible even after years of dysfunctional patterns. But it requires commitment from everyone involved and willingness to do the uncomfortable work of examining and modifying long-established behaviors and expectations. 6 years after being denied college assistance, I had finally received something more valuable than tuition money, a family relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine mutual support, rather than manipulation, guilt, and financial pressure. Have you ever experienced family members who tried to manipulate your financial decisions through guilt or pressure? How did you handle the situation, and what boundaries did you establish to protect yourself while maintaining important family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or helped you think differently about family financial dynamics, please give it a like and share it with others who might benefit from understanding these relationship patterns. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and building authentic family connections based on respect rather than manipulation. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve family relationships built on honesty and mutual respect rather than guilt and financial pressure. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable dysfunction while offering opportunities for genuine growth and positive change.